What do we know and do not know about the LA Kings roster and lineup for next season? Plus, a look at the Kings' biggest surprise from a year ago on today's episode of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We would love it if you would leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we are on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Coming up in today's show, we're going to take a look at the Kings' biggest surprise from last season. And is there anyone that could really surprise for the Kings this coming season? Plus, no specific Kings news from over the weekend to update you on, but there is news that affects the Kings and every NHL team, and we'll get to that in just a moment. As I plan the shows that we're going to do for the offseason, I've got a general idea about what I want to talk about. Obviously, certain events or news will dictate what I talk about, but for example, we have coming up at the end of the month, the NHL draft. It's 19 days away. First round gets underway on June the 28th in Las Vegas. We'll preview the draft for the Kings beforehand, analyze and recap what the Kings do afterwards as well. So that's something that dictates what the shows are going to be about. The Kings currently, by the way, have the 21st pick in the NHL draft. Immediately after the draft, we have free agency, which begins on July 1st. And while the Kings aren't expected to be super active in free agency, we'll definitely discuss potential targets with the Kings to fill a few likely holes that they're going to expect to have in their lineup. But what will those holes be? We're going to talk about that on today's show. As for the NHL news that affects the Kings and all teams, it was announced that the NHL salary cap will rise to $88 million for next season. That's an increase of $4.5 million from the previous season. This is great news for the NHL as it continues to recover from the COVID seasons. The cap going up a little bit more than it was originally projected, which is good as well. And also for teams like the Kings who are expected to spend up for the cap, it's a little bit more money for them to spend. The Kings currently have just over $20 million in cap space, according to capfriendly.com, which apparently is going away, which is really sad news. But we will know, or we do know, some of the players the Kings are going to use that money on. For example, restricted free agents Quentin Byfield and Jordan Spence. The Kings are going to sign those guys. Alex Turcotte, Samuel Fagemo, other restricted free agents that could play a big role in the team next season, they're likely going to sign those guys as well. Now, they're possibly looking at bringing veteran goalie Cam Talbot back. He is the best free agent goalie available. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. Perhaps they're looking to bring back guys like Carl Grundstrom and Blake Lizotte. I think defenseman Matt Roy, as well as forwards Victor Arvidsson and Trevor Lewis, are unlikely to come back. Maybe they could get Arvidsson to return with some sort of a big incentive-laden deal that's tied into games played, but I think he'll get a better deal elsewhere. I know he's looking for something elsewhere. Really, he's looking for the best deal he's going to get. If he can get it from the Kings, he'll take it, but I don't know that they're going to invest the money that he's going to get from somewhere else. Plus, there's the injury issues with him as well. I think even less likely is the Kings somehow re-sign Matt Roy. Now, I know that Rob Blake has said it's something the Kings are looking to explore, leaning towards trying to say that it's something they want to do. But I just don't see, frankly, the money there for him that he's going to command on the open market, and also where he's going to fit. We've talked about it before. Brant Clark, Jordan Spence, Drew Doughty. Those are likely you're going to be your defenseman on the right side for next season. Now, it's possible one of those guys could move over to the left side, but I know the Kings don't want to do that. And it's possible that maybe they could trade a Jordan Spence for some assets if they were able to re-sign Matt Roy, but I just don't see that happening. I think it's very unlikely. And Trevor Lewis, love Louis. a member of 2 Stanley Cup winning teams. If he wants to return and finish it out with the Kings, maybe as being a depth forward, probably a guy who's a healthy scratch, sure. For a cheap price, I guess it's possible. So what do we likely know at this point about the Kings lineup and roster for next season? We know the Kings' top 3 centers are almost certainly set. Andre Kopitar, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Phillip Danault. And I think it should be in that order as far as the lines as well. The 4th line center position isn't set. Blake Lizotte is a restricted free agent, but it seems like comments coming from Rob Blake that the Kings are leaning towards bringing in some of the younger talent to fill in the Kings' bottom 6 forward positions. We saw a little bit of Alex Turcotte, a little bit of Akil Thomas, maybe Samuel Fagemo as well. Those guys are likely going to fill in some roster spots, and it could be Thomas or Turcotte filling in that 4th line center position if they decide to move on from Blake Lizotte. Both of those guys can play center and can play wing. Now, I know there are a lot of Kings fans who are Blake Lizotte fans, and I totally get that. He gives you everything he's got all the time. He's a hard guy not to like. But I do think the other options are cheaper options, and the Kings are looking to squeeze every penny they can out of what they've got. And they feel like it's time to give some of these younger veterans, if you want to call them that, their chance to show what they could do at the NHL level full time. So Akil Thomas is 24 years old, 2nd round pick of the Kings in 2018. They feel like it's time for him to see what we can do. 23-year-old Alex Turcotte, 1st round pick, 5th overall in 2019. They feel like it's time for him to show and get an opportunity for what he can do. And I think that means that it's possible a guy like Blake Lizotte could be on the outside looking in. So we'll see. I think that they could bring Lizotte back. If they do, I think I would call it a mild surprise, because just what I stated, the other guys are cheaper, and it seems like it's their time. So we'll see about that. As for the wingers, we should know the Kings' top 4 wingers, right? The guys who are going to play on the wing in the top 6. Adrian Kempe, Kevin Fiala, Quentin Byfield, Trevor Moore. Those are going to be the top wingers. Now, where they play, which line they play on, obviously that's up to new head coach Jim Hiller. Maybe it's part of the things that they're going to shake up, that we don't see Kempe and Byfield on the top line. Either way, regardless of the combination, those are your top 4 wingers, and those should be the guys that make up the top 6 forwards for the wing position. So those are set. Those guys are all signed. Now, the bottom 6 wingers, you got Alex Laferriere. We talked about Thomas and Turcotte. And so the Kings would need another bottom 6 winger. Maybe it's Carl Grundstrom. I think certainly less likely it could be Arthur Kaliev, although I'd love to see that. So at least 2 of the bottom 6 winger positions are going to be set with Laferriere or either Turcotte or Thomas, I believe. So I'd say there's a decent chance one of those winger spots is going to be available for the Kings to fill, possibly through free agency. But if they were to promote somebody from within the organization, I think Samuel Fagemo would seem the most likely guy to fit that bill. But it does seem like there is a hole to fill as far as a wing position in the Kings' bottom 6. How they fill that, is it from within? Is it from the outside? That remains to be seen. But as far as the forward positions, looks like there is that one spot to be filled, likely the left side winger on the 3rd line. As for the defense, we know we've got Drew Doughty and Mikey Anderson and Vladislav Gavrikov. The Kings, I believe, will re-sign Jordan Spence, likely lose Matt Roy, with Brant Clark ready to fill in as part of the solution for the Kings on the right side with the departure of Matt Roy, if that in fact does happen. Andreas Englund is signed for next season. Of course, he played all year as the Kings' 3rd pairing defenseman on the left side. They could certainly bring him back. It is certainly, I think, something the Kings would like to do as far as bringing in another left shot defenseman, maybe to play on that 2nd pairing, and maybe you push Vladislav Gavrikov down to the 3rd pairing, or maybe they bring in someone to be on that 3rd pairing. They've got Andreas Englund there if they don't get anyone to upgrade on that left side at either the 2nd or the 3rd pairing behind Mikey Anderson. If they were looking from within, there is Jacob Moverar there. who's in the organization. He signed for the next 2 years, former 4th-round pick back in 2016. So he's available as well. So it could be either England. It could be either Jacob Moverar. Again, I think the Kings would like to upgrade on the left side with a left shot defenseman, but we'll see if they're able to do that or not. So that, I would say that's another hole that could be filled from within or from the outside. We'll have to wait and see what the Kings decide to do. As for goaltending, we know the Kings have their backup, David Riddick, who signed a 1-year, $1 million deal. The Kings' number one goalie position is the biggest hole the Kings have to fill. I still think the Kings are looking to put a Band-Aid on the position, and I still think they're looking to bring Cam Talbot back on another 1-year deal with incentives built in, similar to the deal he had this past season. That he is the best free agent goalie available, in my opinion, and I don't think that's much of a controversial opinion. I know our guy Edwin disagrees, but I think it's pretty clear if you look at the numbers of the free agent goalies available, Cam Talbot's at the top of the list. Now, I know that Talbot could probably get a better deal from another team to be their number 2 goalie. That said, I don't think there's another number 1 goalie position out there for him. He's going to turn 37 next month. The only other team other than the Kings who made the playoffs this last year, who does not have a number 1 goalie re-signed for this coming season, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Could they be looking at Cam Talbot as a Band-Aid for them? Possible. But I think, again, the most likely and best option for Talbot is to come back to the Kings. He wants to be a number 1 goalie on a team that is a playoff caliber team. That's the Kings. They know him. He knows them. It's a pretty comfortable situation. So I think that's going to happen. Now, the Kings could certainly go out and look to bring in another goalie. Are they looking to solve the situation in net for now and in the future with a goalie that they could bring in to play the next 3 or 4 years at least? That's a possibility. You know, Eric Portillo is waiting in the wings. We're going to talk about more about him a little bit later. I think, though, if you're looking to solve that situation from within, it's obviously Eric Portillo to me. I think that they would look to give him a chance over going with a guy like David Riddick, who's a solid number 2. But I still think Portillo, honestly, is still a year away. He just played his first pro season. He shared time in net during that first pro season until they got to the playoffs. So there's still development there, I think, that needs to be made with Eric Portillo before they decide whether to give him his shot at the NHL level or not. So again, it looks like the Kings potentially are looking to fill 3 holes in the lineup: third-line winger, left shot defenseman, and a number 1 goalie, which, again, I think they already know what they're going to do, but we'll have to wait and see if that's what they're going to do or not. We are going to get more in-depth into the names that are out there as far as free agents that could fill those 3 spots as we get closer to July 1st and talk about the free agency signing period. But just want to kind of give an overview on today's show about what the Kings lineup will likely look like, what are some of the things that they need to fill in, and some of the options they have going forward. Up next, we're going to look at the biggest surprise for the LA Kings from last season and ask, could there be any other big surprises coming up? That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Summertime means baseball plus the NHL and NBA finals, and you can bet on all of it on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200. You could bet on everything from the NBA Finals MVP, who's going to knock it out of the park, who's going to lift the Stanley Cup over the head in the NHL. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. The Dodgers are coming off a big series win over the New York Yankees. Will the Panthers beat the Oilers for their first Stanley Cup? Will the Celtics take down the Mavericks for their 17th championship? It's a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and it can be even more fun by winning with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Time to have one of our off-season Kings player profiles, and we're going to look at the Kings' biggest surprise from last season. Now, you could say that Quentin Byfield's big step forward to getting himself on the path to being hopefully an elite player at the NHL level could be the Kings' biggest surprise from last year. But I felt like Q always had this in him. Wasn't sure if it was going to be as soon as last year or not, but I don't think that was the Kings' biggest surprise. Maybe a pleasant surprise, but not the Kings' biggest surprise. Maybe on the negative side, if you're looking at a surprise, For the Kings, it would be the season that Pierre-Luc Dubois had in his first year in LA. Certainly a disappointing season. Maybe that was surprising. But to me, the biggest surprise for the LA Kings last season, I don't even think it's close, to be honest with you, is winger Alex Laferriere. The 22-year-old played 4 games for the Ontario Reign the season before last. That was after turning pro after 2 years at Harvard. There was really nothing that he showed in that tiny sample size, nor would he be expected to be with the Reign, that would have led you to believe he was going to be a full-time NHL player this past season. It was thought by just about everyone that the 6'1", 205-pound winger would need at least a full pro season in the AHL to show what he could do, and then maybe the following season get a look to join the LA Kings roster. Plus, there were also higher draft picks and players with more experience that were in line ahead of him, as Laferriere was a third-round pick in 2020. But Laferriere just put his head down, went to work, looked solid in the preseason. There was an injury to Victor Arvidsson, would help to open up some spots that were available, caught the eyes of the Kings coaching staff, got an opportunity, and then just kind of never let go of it. Obviously was a interesting start to his NHL career, getting into a fight in his NHL debut on opening night at home against the Colorado Avalanche's Logan O'Connor. That was certainly a surprise, but maybe not as big of a surprise as Laferriere playing in all but one of the Kings' 82 games last season. In those 81 games, he put up a respectable 12 goals with 11 assists for 23 points. Now, those numbers aren't going to blow anybody away, but again, considering his lack of experience, to do that while basically learning on the job how to be a professional was actually pretty impressive. And now the question is, what's next for Alex Laferriere? Will he take another step forward this coming season? Now, it's hard to believe he wouldn't, considering he now knows what he's capable of, what he needs to work on. He's a year smarter, with a little wisdom of what it takes to be an NHL caliber player. You would think he's a little stronger as he's still growing. And he's a guy who was a late bloomer as well, as far as his growth and development. But I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see his numbers at least slightly improve from a year ago. Now, that said, it does seem unlikely that he's ever going to turn into a top 6 forward, unless maybe he gets into a situation where the Kings look to have a center with a sniper and pair them up with kind of a power forward type of guy who's going to go to the net, screen the goaltender, get rebounds, that kind of thing. We did see that briefly with the LA Kings. He got a few games on the top line with Andrei Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, and we'll see if that's something maybe Jim Hiller looks into as well. So he could be that type of player, but just from a skill standpoint, I don't think you look at him necessarily as being a top 6 forward. He does have decent size. He's got decent hands, and he is a guy who's not afraid to be physical and go to the net. The effort level is definitely there night in and night out. He does have a bit of a physical side to his game, which is pretty amazing considering, again, he grew up as a severely undersized player. When he was playing in junior, he was 5'6". And obviously, as his body was growing, he grew as well and has grown into a player who's got an NHL caliber body now. And who knows, maybe he grows a little bit more. Who knows? So it is cliche to say, well, he's smart because he went to Harvard, but he does appear to be a pretty smart player, judging by what you see on the ice. And also, I did see that apparently this offseason, he is still pursuing his psychology degree from Harvard. I saw that Kings insider Zach Dooley shared that in an interview a couple weeks ago. But as far as his numbers, as far as his hockey, what he's going to accomplish there, I think likely a third line winger. He's never scored more than 26 goals at any level or more than 50 points at any level in his hockey career, at least junior and college level. His high for goals in his junior years were 26 goals. College, 21 goals was his high. The most points he had in his junior career was 50. In college, the most he had was 42. Now, to be fair, those numbers were not an 82-game NHL schedule. The highest number of games he played in junior hockey was 49, and the most he played in college was 34. So obviously he's got a lot more games to be able to eclipse those numbers, but I think those numbers are probably what we would expect from Alex Laferriere. I think his ceiling at the NHL level is in the 20-goal range. I think his ceiling at the NHL level is around the 50-point range. But obviously, you need those types of players to fill in your roster and play their roles. And for the Kings, it certainly looks like Alex Laferriere is a guy that can do that. Also, great to see a homegrown guy who you got again in the third round, who's developed very quickly and now has been a guy who can contribute at the NHL level. Now, could he turn into something more than that? I think it's unlikely, but hey, he's surprised me before. I'd certainly love for him to do it again. So for Alex Laferriere, looking forward to what he can continue to do in his development. A surprise, the biggest surprise for the Kings last season, won't be a big surprise this coming season for the Kings, as they're now expecting him to play a solid bottom six role. But excited about what the possibility is for him. Should get better. I don't know if he's going to take a huge step forward, but I could see him taking a slight step forward next year and continue to be a good contributor, hopefully for many years to come for the LA Kings. By the way, if you're going to be looking for Alex Laferriere on the ice next season, do not look for number 78. Apparently, he's changing his number, and next year will wear number 14 for the LA Kings. Is there another Alex Laferriere waiting to surprise us for this coming season? We'll discuss that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You always find exactly what you were looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Is there another Alex Laferriere for the Kings this coming season? Someone that at this point we do not expect to be a full-time NHL player, but under the right circumstances, maybe he could be. I don't think Samuel Fagemo would fit into that description. Yes, he's never done it at the NHL level, but he had 43 goals in the AHL. So if he came into the Kings lineup, maybe on the third line at a winger and scored maybe around 20 goals, I don't think that would be shocking. Brandt Clarke, if he comes in next season and has a huge rookie year offensively, I don't think that would be shocking because of the expectations that we have on him to be an elite player one day, maybe not next year, but sometime in the future. So I don't think that would be shocking either. I do think there is one player who is a pretty good comp to Alex Laferriere, somebody who played in college, but you still feel like he needs to have a full pro season before he can get a shot in the NHL. And I think that's goalie Eric Portillo. Like Laferriere, he's a bit older, even though he only has one season of pro experience because he played in college like Laferriere at Harvard and Portillo at Michigan. Portillo does have a little bit more pro experience than the handful of games that Laferriere had. Last year, Portillo did play 39 games in his first pro season with the Ontario Reign, but shared time in net and is likely going to be the full-time goalie this coming season. We certainly thought Laferriere, at least certainly I did, I thought he was going to need a full pro season to kind of prove it before getting a chance at the NHL level. I think that's the same for Eric Portillo. I think he needs a full season as being a number one goalie to show what he can do at the AHL level. And if he shows what he can do and it's positive, then maybe he gets a shot the following season. For him to do it, though, this season, I think would be pretty shocking, pretty surprising. But let's say Cam Talbot doesn't re-sign with the Kings. They could certainly go out and find another veteran goalie for some insurance to go along with David Riddick. And worst case scenario, they would have to go with two veteran guys. And we still don't know what the situation is with Phoenix Copley, who's recovering from knee surgery. But if the Kings are looking at two okay but not spectacular veterans, maybe they feel like, let's give Portillo a shot and see what he can do early on. Maybe he has a great preseason, and that could lead to at least a chance to start in the NHL. And if he grabs the ball and runs with it, who knows? Again, not likely. I'm not expecting that at all. But again, we're talking about who could be a big, huge surprise for the Kings this season. And I would circle again, goaltender Eric Portillo. So we shall see. Before we go, I do want to give a shout out to friend of the show and everydayer Jim in Lakewood. He and his wife Fareed had me over for a Stanley Cup watch party on Saturday, and we got to watch the Florida Panthers shut out the Edmonton Oilers. Everyone was happy about that. He also invited a few neighbors over who were Kings fans, just people in his neighborhood he saw walking their dogs, and they were wearing Kings gear, and he invited them over to hang out with us. It was super cool to meet them. Longtime Kings season ticket holders Chris and Karen. We talked about the Kings. We watched the Stanley Cup final game, had some great food and drink. A good time was had by all. So again, thank you so much to Jim and Fareed for their hospitality. And who knows, maybe they would be interested in hosting a Locked On LA Kings watch party sometime next season. Maybe the Kings are playing on the road for a weekend game. They seem to love to host get-togethers. So who knows? Maybe select special friends of the show could be invited to come over. Who knows? It's maybe it's a possibility. And Jim, I know you're watching, so I'm planting a seed for that for next season. As for you other everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up this week, Wednesday, we're going to have a special guest. Former Kings assistant general manager Mike Fuda is going to join us. He was a part of the Kings' 2 Stanley Cup winning teams, and he's going to be on Wednesday. Now, Tuesday is the 12-year anniversary of the Kings' first Stanley Cup championship in 2012, and Thursday's the 10-year anniversary of the Kings winning the 2024 Stanley Cup title. So Mike Fuda will be sandwiched in between those 2 anniversaries. He was a part of both those championship teams. Very excited to get a chance to talk to him about how those 2 teams were constructed and just the memories of those 2 Stanley Cup wins for the LA Kings. So really looking forward to that. On Tuesday and on Thursday, we'll also talk more about those seasons for the LA Kings as well. And then on Friday, of course, it'll be another Kings fan feedback show. What do you think about what I talked about today, about the roster spots for the Kings? Do you agree about the spots that I think are going to be available? Do you agree with the spots that I kind of think are set for the Kings? What about filling those holes for the LA Kings for next season? Your thoughts are welcome. If you want to send an email for the Friday feedback show, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, we always welcome your comments in the comments section below. And we would love for you to stay interactive with us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.